Good morning, everyone. We're about 10 minutes from the open here. I'm going to start just a little bit earlier today. Um, let's go through first that at the bottom of the stream, there is um, information that this stream is not financial advice. Anything you see on the stream is educational. Um, Trading futures or any other asset is risky. So trade your own strategy. Also know that the stream is 10 to 15 seconds variable behind live. So anything that you see happening on the stream happened in the past. So um, take that information accordingly. So with all that being said, happy Monday. Uh, it was a gap up for Globex to start our August trading. First day of the month. We kind of ended the very, very end of last week's Friday session. We had sold off on Friday and then rallied over 50% of it back. And then as we headed into the close, there was some late breaking, like literally almost when futures were settling, some late breaking news that there was going to be supposedly be heavy bombing in the Middle East over the weekend. None of that came to fruition. The market gapped up on Sunday as a result of no bombing happening. And then as the evening kind of went on and the news cycle went on, it seemed less sure whether that no conflict meant that things were getting resolved or opened or moving, and just a lot of uncertainty still playing out there. And so the NASDAQ sold this back off. We didn't quite fill the overnight gap up, which is sitting down here at 28,287. This is the beginning of a new month. So anything that's value related here is really not new month and a new week. There's not really anything to look at here yet, but for last week, we're basically sitting and we've bounced just a little bit off of the top edge of last week's value. The point of control is still sitting down here for last week, right around 28K. We had a nice rally with earnings as well as we had a hedge fund blow up last week, which is always fun. So we got a rally in tech stocks, as well as some decent tech earnings from Amazon. So, and Microsoft as well. So last week we had a lot of news. We had a lot of things for the market to digest. We ultimately ended up at the upper side of last week's range before kind of selling into the bell at the very, very end of Friday's session. So the overnight has actually been relatively quiet. You'll see the depth of market over here on the right side of my screen. And it's trading relatively slowly in comparison to what we were doing on Friday and most days last week. Whether that holds once the bell rings is a question mark, but it's something that I gauge when I look at kind of the overnight session. So, the high for the overnight is right around 28,700, and the low is, call it 28,400. So still a decent range overnight, looking at like 300-ish points. But just trading kind of slow, pretty choppy. Um, no giant flush to go fill the overnight futures gap, and just kind of sitting here consolidating. There's a couple of imbalances from the overnight session here at 566 and 630, but those are Globex imbalances, so I wouldn't necessarily expect those to hold during RTH, but they are reference points as we're getting started. You see a little bit of exhaustion the from the sellers down here. They put in a high intensity delta zone as buyers or sellers were really pushing into the low here, and then we got a pop as sellers lost control, and now we're popped back up into this next zone. So we open here in about 5 minutes. If you haven't traded with me on the stream before, I'm an opening range trader in the sense that I wait for the first 30 minutes before I start taking trades. I want to see how the market opens up. I want to see what volatility is like. I want to see what our range is like. And I was just chatting with someone this morning and was like, every time that I break that rule of, I think I'm gonna, trade pre-opening 30-minute range, I usually lose money. I usually get stopped out. So just one of my rules. I'll still be doing analysis as I watch this open here in about 5 minutes. But you won't see me taking any trades until about 9 a.m. Central Time. If we look at the broader market, let me pull up my Thinkorswim. Let's take a look and see what is moving around this morning. So I have a watch list that is just the S&P's top holdings. I just made it myself. It's not, I don't know how exactly, it's not 100% accurate probably as things move around, but Microsoft and Google and Meta and Amazon are all up 1%. There's some Dow stocks like Disney and Visa, Home Depot, MasterCard. There's a lot of stuff that's up over 1% this morning. On the downside, Nvidia is down 1.25%. Um, Exxon is down 1.25% due to no bombs being dropped overseas over the weekend. And Intel is down 2%. So some of the bigger, there's a couple like Nvidia and Intel, those chip makers being down. I think AMD is also down a couple percent this morning as well. Um, those tech stocks have really driven a lot of the momentum in the NASDAQ over the past couple months. And so if those are down, that is why the NASDAQ is kind of slowly bleeding as we get here into the bell, even though some of the bigger names like Google and Amazon and Microsoft are actually up. So something to keep in mind, and um, something that I pay attention to, because if you're coming into this morning thinking about shorting, um, there very well could be some shorts that are possible. I'm going to lean a bit more neutral to start and see how this kind of opens up. We had the gap up, arguably bullish to gap up 300 points. Um, but we've given most of that back and we've just traded really choppy and we're trading quite slow as well. And so, I want to see kind of like, buyers did good work to get this up off the low last week and just barely, they tried to close it outside of value and couldn't do it, just mostly due to the news that was coming right before the bell, before futures fully closed on Friday. But closed near the upper part of value last week and now trading above that or just right at it right now. So I give a little bit of edge to the buyers, like if they can fill this overnight futures gap and get a bounce and rally back up towards the point of control, I think that would be helpful. But it's a little bit split in the tech world right now. You have some of the bigger names up, but then you also have some of the bigger chip maker names down. So it may just be getting pulled in both directions. In terms of percentages, let's take a look. The NASDAQ is exactly flat. ES is up about half a percent, and the Dow is up over 1%. Bitcoin is down 1.25%. I don't trade crypto, but I watch Bitcoin just to get a feel for are we going risk on, and really what that means is like are people interested in buying riskier assets? Are they willing to buy some of those things that are more momentum related rather than like looking at the Dow up 1% looks a bit more like people want to be buying into things that are a little safer, a little less volatile. And that makes sense because we have a lot of unknowns from a geopolitical standpoint coming in from the weekend. So let's see how we open up. We're about 10 seconds away from the New York Open. Sitting here near the bottom side of Globex's range. So just kind of an immediate push lower. One of my friends sent me a thing over the weekend showing that like gaps on QQQ, like that there's I don't remember how many hundreds of gaps that are there are over the last 30 years of trading or whatever it might be that have never been filled. Um, and he's just teasing me because I always look to see that these gap ups like this tend to get filled in my experience at some point in time. Um, but these are also futures gap ups, which are different than QQQ gap ups. So um, we'll see. We'll see who's right there because I'm about 30 points from being right here. Just so I can send him a message and be like, see, 1 of 50. We have a little buy imbalance there at the bottom. So if we go take a look at that, right there at 320, yeah, it's going to be this 83 buy. So not super big, but got some exhaustion and kind of a good push from the buyers there off that spot. Coming right back to it. Yeah, so this imbalance here is at 2250. They just came back right in front of it and tried to hold it. I'm getting a little bit of a bounce here. I'll zoom in just a little bit. So the 287 is the overnight gap fill. That's what they're bouncing right in front of right now. So like when I look at the S&P's um, top holdings this morning and seeing names like Microsoft and Google um, up over 1%, but then seeing like Nvidia and Intel down almost 2%. Um, that can go kind of one of two ways. Just something to kind of like, in terms of like what I keep in mind is that either, you know, the ones that are up 1 or 2% kind of like gravitationally pull in the other ones, or there's a lot of room from the ones that are already up 1.5% or so to kind of like sell off down to a level closer to the ones that are already down. So I don't particularly like the NASDAQ gets harder to trade, in my opinion, when you have that kind of split, right? Like not all tech stocks right now, as of the open, are trading in the same direction. And that can make it really difficult and choppy. Um, and same kind of idea that like, if ES and the Dow are up and the NASDAQ is red or vice versa, like it tends to just make for choppier trading. So it's something that I'm keeping in mind after seeing that a lot of AI names and chip stocks are down um, this morning, but some of the more staple names for tech are up. Technically, Google is an AI name, but doing a lot of other stuff. Um, so when I think of, at least for myself, when I think of AI names, I'm thinking about like, I'm thinking of chip processors and storage and things like that. So that's a hold right in front of the overnight gap, and a pretty strong rally from the buy crowd. A little bit of exhaustion at the low. We saw this imbalance hold. So they printed a imbalance here as they were making a new low and then held it on a little tap back. So I don't trade pre-opening range, pre 30-minute opening range, so that's not a trade that I'm going to take, but it's a nice looking setup right there. So this zone that they're about to try to pop into here, right below the session mid, is something that held a couple times overnight before we sold off. So let's see if buyers can get back through there. And we weren't trading super fast in the overnight, but RTH has definitely sped that up here, which is usually the case. But a couple of times last week, due to like earnings and FOMC and a bunch of other catalysts, the overnight, especially 30 minutes pre-opening bell, was trading really fast, um, which isn't the case right now. Buyers really, really pushing, and something to consider when you see moves like this from not sort of filling this overnight gap is it's a kind of semi-obvious target for sellers. And so when you're coming down with momentum and then you kind of stick save like 30 points ahead of it, you can get people that are kind of piling into that obvious trade. And then when you start to get a little bit of a push, you got this buy imbalance, you put in a higher low and then you got a push. There's a lot of people that were like, oh, well, I'll just, I'll cover at the close, right? Like we're only 30 points from the gap and they hold a little bit longer than is comfortable and you get this momentum squeeze back in the other direction. So it's just something that I think about when we're that close. And probably something that I think about because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm somebody that in the past I typically trade. Like I wouldn't be shorting this close to this gap fill, but like if I was short, say on this pop here back into this zone, that would be an obvious target for me. Now, granted, I wouldn't let it come that much further back against me, but I would probably give some back, thinking that we would put in a lower high and go and clean this up. But looks like some other people had that idea as well, and it's kind of blowing up in their face at the moment. That was an aggressive rally up. That was 200 points, almost just straight vertical. So buyers are awake. Um, like I said, kind of leaning, I would say neutral with a slight buy bias, just because buyers were really able to get it up off the low last week and finish almost outside the top edge of value. Um, and leaning neutral-ish because of the news cycle and um, yeah, that buyers have yet to kind of prove themselves here in the last few weeks. So it's a good start for them up off the lows here. Um, let's see if that has any more organic buying behind it or if it's just a quick little squeeze. It's kind of this interesting little shelf that they built right before the open, like 415-ish. Be interested to see whether they could hold that on a pullback. Still too early for me to take a trade, just kind of like looking at where this might try to hold if it wants to hold. Um, other times, they couldn't break this back down into this gap. Sometimes the NASDAQ likes to do a really solid momentum push in the other direction before catching momentum back down the other way. This is also first time for us streaming on a Monday. Um, and I was a little groggy getting out of bed this morning. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing this morning. Um, and Mondays can be tricky, particularly with the current news cycle. That wasn't a very nice move. Um, the it's like I guess it could be weighed as like pros versus cons of, the current administration not wanting to do or like trying to sort of like stuff all their Middle East operations into the weekend to supposedly tamp down market volatility. And like that's a nice idea. Um, but if we just exit the weekend with a bunch of uncertainty again, like didn't do what you said you were going to do, and just nobody really knows what's going on over there. So then you just like sort of bottle up all of that anxiety and fear and unknown into the market and release it on Monday morning on the first day of the month. So just, I don't know. It's like it works for a little while, but I think that that story feels like it's getting a bit old. And the market is, I mean, I'd like to say that they're catching on, but they gapped it up 300 points uh, last night, and I think oil is down 6%. I think I looked at this morning. So, you know, they haven't caught on yet. I'm also not the expert to talk about this, but the another thing that's happening globally right now is uh, the U.S. is supporting Japan's currency, and there's a lot of like that's probably worth a Google search or a Chat GPT question about all the implications for that. But it does technically have impacts on US markets. How much kind of remains to be seen. But there's just a lot of sort of like global things happening right now. And like it may not matter for, definitely doesn't matter if I'm like, I want to short 500 and get out at 450, right? Like, fine. But if you're just kind of looking at the overall picture about what you think the temperature of the market is going to be, are we going to be volatile? Are we going to be one directional? Are we going to be choppy? Are we going to be low volume? All of those things, it's worth kind of just like having a zoomed out view, and it doesn't really matter in to me, like in the sense of like, whichever way you swing politically doesn't really matter, but like just being aware of like what's going on because all of those things are what drive the market in one direction or another. And so knowing what kind of environment you're stepping into, I think is like really important. I think it keeps you from taking bad trades, lets you know what your stop loss should be, in the sense of like how wide or what position sizing you're doing. So um, that's kind of my neutralish lean coming in this morning is that there's just a lot of news that came out, particularly right after the bell on Friday, that the market didn't have any time to digest. And then anybody that wants to trade size can't really trade size in Globex, without being very careful or moving the market around a ton. So all of those people that are like uncertain about large positions and what are we going to do and post rate decision, all get to execute here at 8:30 on Monday morning. So another reason that I let the opening range get set because I want to see what people who have a lot more money than me want to do with this. Um, so buyers defended right in front of this shelf that I talked about. They made this little shelf at 415. Came right from the open slash right before the open. They had kind of held this a few times. Um, yeah, One of our members posted a chart showing it's like nice looking setup pre-open, but doesn't trade doesn't trade this early either. And it's like I swear it's just like dangling. It's like putting sweets in front of somebody on a diet, right? You're like, it's gonna be fine this time. You're gonna be fine. You can take an opening range. You can take a trade before the opening range gets set. You can take a range before initial balance gets set, and it just every time I do it, I get mad at myself. So you're like, eventually I'm gonna learn. So I had one, we've all gone through different periods of trading, I'm sure, where you're just like, nothing is working. I'm going to try something brand new, right? And I swear there's like I don't know what market phenomenon it is, but it's like you pick something new to do, and it's like so weird how this works, but it's like, I think it's just the like maybe randomness or maybe slight like naivety of like not knowing exactly how the strategy that you're about to try works, but it's like I'm going to try something new, and it like works amazing for like the first like 4 or 5 days, maybe even like week, and you're just like, this is it. I have finally found it, right? And, found that strategy that I've been missing. What was I doing this other thing? And then you just at some point just get smoked. It's like you get just enough to be like, I think I got it. And then you're like, no, you don't got it. Because every strategy has a environment that it works in, a time that it works in, it has streaks that it works, and then streaks that it doesn't. And when you bump strategies around all the time, you're just never gonna you can't get any sort of like stability to know whether the strategy that you're doing is having a period of time that it works really well, or is it just, you happen to like jump into one of those streaks. So there are some very large aggressive participants right up here at like 530. That was two really large imbalances, and disagreeable imbalances there. So you had a buy imbalance come in at like 530, which is going to be that one there at like 250. And then just right below it at 524, you have a 136. And that was pretty fast, and that was pretty violent. So buyers tried to push that. They tried to get it through the, it's not really the opening range, it's where the opening range high, the RTH high is at right now. And they tried to push it through and just got kind of slapped. And we're trading pretty fast again. I don't know that it feels quite as fast as Friday, but it's getting there. And just kind of a gross profile so far. Like you have a taper at the top. Point of control is technically still up here at 580. You have kind of an empty low volume node here all the way up from where we're starting to create what is probably going to become the point of control here around 480. And then you have some, you know, excess here outside of value. So messy from both sides right now. This is a little bit of what I expected just given the news cycle over the weekend. Like, you know, I'm not going to talk politics on this stream, but like, I think as a trader, we all have frustration of like, can this stuff just resolve in one direction or another? Because this like, gap up, gap down, you know, peace deal, no peace deal, market rally, not market rally, and just like, and the indexes aren't that far off of their highs, right? Like the NASDAQ, I think, is like 10-ish% off of its high. I didn't check from this morning, but like around there. And then, the S&P is even less so. Like the S&P is like 2 or 3% off of its high. And, we're just chopping around. Like nobody wants to put on that final bit of risk to take the market higher, until things, I think, kind of resolve. Um, One of my friends was like, do you think this goes on until the midterms? And I was like, that's probably not wrong unless something drastic happens in the Middle East. But like, oh, the prospect of another 3 months of this is just terrible. It's just really, really, really choppy. Like we're basically just rotating around the session mid right now. Our delta is mostly neutral-ish for this exact candle with a slight buy edge. You're sitting here right at the point of control. I think you're sitting basically right above last week's edge of value. They kind of probed into value from last week. Um, you know, you're like the week before's bottom edge of value is the center of this week's or the overnight's value. Like it's just until we can get up and out of some of this area, which I feel like I just keep saying every single week, um, you know, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And just like a note about like how choppy, right? So like our scalper IQ delta flow study has a 50 period moving average on it, right? To smooth out some of these transitions so you can stay in trends for longer, you don't get chopped up as much. And even with all of that, everything we're doing to kind of like show trends, we're sitting here at neutral delta, you know? And so if it looks choppy with scalper IQ, it is very choppy. Um, so just gonna let this settle in. We have about 7-ish minutes before the 30-minute opening range is set. And so far, I'm not excited about anything that I see here. Multiple tests up here. I like this like 520 level. It's definitely a low volume node in terms of the overall session. So if they pop it, you're probably going to see close to 600 would be my guess. Um, I think sellers have built the profile to have a little bit better defense. Or sorry, buyers have built this to have a little bit better defense down here. You have this low volume node. You have this nice little shelf that they held right in front of. There's like another um, pocket of volume here at 400. Um, so looks like it could move fast up while there's a few places to hold on the way down. I'm sure my friend will troll me for saying this later, but like, I wish I'd be much happier with this overall of what's going on right now if we had cleaned up this overnight gap. But we did not. This is up to this overnight imbalance here. This is also right at the open, the Globex open. So call it 565 exactly. That font color is a little hard to read. Like Motive Wave allows you to put, I think other platforms do too, but like you can color different levels on your depth of market based on like, high or low, mid. You can color a bunch of things. And I had it that way for a while. And I guess I still have some on from like the open. And I think I have one for the high and the low. But when I first started in this program, I like gave a color to like every single thing and like put it on my DOM, but like there's no label, right? Like this doesn't tell you that it's the open. I only know that it's the open by looking at their the OHLC study that shows the levels here. But like I couldn't do it without a legend. I was like, what is light blue? What is teal? So I just like at some point I just like was like, all right, let me show the big ones that I care about. It's never good to be trading and you're like having to flip through a color book to be like, what did I put for the Globex open? And is that the weekly low? Is that, yeah, it's just too much information. So Yeah, and that's kind of like, something that I think about when we popped just now is that this was kind of this low volume area, right? And now you're doing a pretty fast trip up towards 600. So if you're looking for momentum style plays, looking at what is between where you're going to get in and where you want it to go is a good thing to pay attention to, particularly with volume profile. If this was kind of littered with shelves like this one down here, like little ones poking out in the middle of this low volume node, I think that would be less of a good trade setup in my opinion. But this was a fast pop through this area straight up to, I think they exactly tagged what is the point of control right now. The next imbalance is from the overnight session here at 6:30. It's kind of in an interesting spot because it's basically sitting right at the edge of value, and it's pretty large. It's 420. And buyers are coming up into this pretty hot. I don't see anything that I love still. Buyers definitely have the ball right now across the midline for the session. If you're long, you're probably looking at the overnight high and this wick high from Friday. And I think I talked a little bit about this on stream from last week, but like even if I like this level as a potential like resistance play, and I don't know what, looks like we have some news going on or something, like you see the lack of liquidity in the depth of market. That's also probably actually just the rollover to setting of the 30-minute opening range. But yeah, really, really thin liquidity there. So if you're in position, be careful. Um, but as I was saying, especially when we're coming up with that much speed, like I'm not just going to put an offer at uh, at 629 and just sit there and wait for it. Like I see now that they find that spot to be, something that they're going to pay attention to for sellers. Um, and so if it comes back up here, I might be interested in scalping. But just kind of saying you're not ever really gonna see me be in as like first touch because I hate getting run over, and sticking a limit order at a level that you think is gonna hold is a surefire way for that to happen. Was that ISM this morning? Someone just mentioned that was ISM. I feel like it's a weird day for, is that typically on Mondays? Not sure if market wants to care about that. Just an extra reason to throw some volatility into the morning. My TradingView app is having a meltdown. I use it for their calendar, which is like a love-hate relationship, but somehow I just clicked something and it just added a whole bunch of countries that were not they're not ours. And I was like, wait, I don't see any PMI. And then I was like, oh. So coming back into this buy imbalance right here, right below point of control. Look at them push that. Well, it's just going to come down to see how they might hold that level, and I guess the answer is they did. I'm going to go back up to my 630 level. They just don't want to leave it on my depth of market. I'm like scrolling up here to see what 630 is going to look like, and they're going to go back down to this imbalance here at 565. I'm just going to leave it alone. I feel like after you've been trading for a while, you can like watch the first 30 minutes and be like, this thing's going to be a pain in the ass today. You have this imbalance where we had this kind of like fight here, and it's also like a zone, this high intensity delta zone here. So I'm going to look at 5, call it just this range that's on my depth of market right now, see if they can hold this area on a pullback. Bottom edge of it's 524, basically centered on my depth of market right now. Oh my God. Every time I scroll to an area, it goes away from me. I know some people have their depth of market set to auto scroll. I don't do that because one, it gives me massive anxiety, and I lose track of like what prices I'm looking at, and also like different depth of markets do different things. I don't particularly like what any of them do when they move while I'm watching them. But a lot of them have buffers. So like they'll have like a centering thing. So like if price is at 523 and it gets to 530, it'll just like jump up all at once to center 530 as it tries to keep price on the window. Um, and I had that happen a couple of times when I was first starting where like I'm like, great, I'm buying 523. And oh, actually, I just bought 535 because I clicked right as we shifted. And so that is just a non starter for me. I'll manually scroll like a plebe. Um, I can double click to get to wherever price is right now. It just won't auto center for me. Since we're just kind of chopping here around the point of control, um, we are working on a kind of depth of mark simulator slash replay. So Motive Wave has actually what is a pretty nice replay mode. So you can like go back to a certain date and watch how, if you have scalper IQ studies or anything else on, you can like, watch to see how a session played out. And those are really good, but they don't carry any depth of market information. So you can't actually like play back to see what was happening on the depth of market. You can still place like paper trades simulator here, but it's really annoying to me that like I can't go back and see what like slow down and see like what the actual price action was like during those times. So we're working on a simulator for that. It'll just be an internal tool, but we're planning on making um, some YouTube videos showing uh, how to read depth of market, um, show some different setups because right now the Nasdaq is also moving so fast, and it's not like people who read the depth of market like myself are like somehow like superhuman. Like I can't see the prices trading that fast, but like I'm looking for a particular area. Like I'll kind of like mentally draw out like a 15 to 20 point zone around whatever level I'm looking at to see how participants are going to interact there. And so we're going to make some YouTube videos and be able to like slow down the actual depth of market ladder and see like what happened around certain imbalances or certain lows or highs. Um, so just playing with it over the weekend, still have some bugs to iron out, but was pretty cool. I was having some fun being able to look at it and go through and actually see what was happening um, during those times. So they just held this 530 imbalance to the tick. And it's also like these highs that we put in before we were able to break higher. You'll notice the candle coloring not shifting over here, like tried to here, but like just means that sellers are putting in a lot more aggression and a lot more volume on these push downs than the buyers are doing on the way back up. Also getting into a very tight, choppy range here. This is 530 to 600 and compressing inside of that range. So it's like, I think about that in the sense of like, even if I get the perfect entry, right? If I'm using like a 20-point stop, perfect entry to perfect exit is like, probably going from like zone to zone, or at least taking, if I have multiple contracts, which I won't today, but um, taking one off here, like, yeah, range compression is not what I like to see, and we're just hugging the point of control right now. It's funny. I had a live stream I think last week where I was kind of poking fun at. I had looked at some other live streams just to kind of get an idea of like what other trading streams do, and I found one where a guy was playing a video game. People were like watching him play a video game, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's kind of a thing. Like I know people have like Twitch and stuff, but like kind of weird to me to have a market live stream where you're trading a video game. But then I'm like, then sessions like this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Happy Monday. Would you like some chop? Well, while we're watching this trade inside of like a 25-point range, um, anybody do anything fun over the weekend? You can throw it in chat, or if you're in our Discord, you can throw it in there. Um, I'm a pretty avid cyclist and runner when I have the time. And so I upped mileage this last week. Just tricky to do at this time of year here in Texas. It is super, super, super hot. Um, but I'm feeling it a bit going into this week. Did a couple of long runs and one long bike ride. Um, but that was my fun for the weekend. I don't know if anybody else did anything else that was more fun, less self-punishing than that. I think the market just like I think the market just like wants to hold in the sense of like there's got to be some resolution of some bigger picture items, I think, before we really start to move in one direction or another. Nice. I see that in our Discord. More fun than being on a bike for an hour and a half in the heat. I should just have like a if prices consolidated inside of this number of points within a certain period of time, it just turns the live stream off. You guys will see me on Wednesday. And these are also like, probably the people watching this probably know this, but if you're watching this fresh for the first time, like these are the days, in my opinion, like just to be really, really careful. Like it's not really moving anywhere, not predictably. And so it's just an easy way to get yourself into trades that you don't belong in, get chopped up, and lose money inside of, a range that if you came back to this at the end of the day and you looked at this zoomed out and you go, I lost money and all of that. Why was I touching it? Right. So just of note, I'm just going to keep my depth of market at this like multiple imbalance and zone level. It's like the only area that I'm kind of interested in potentially scalping. And it would be really quick. So I'd probably want to get in at like 525 to 520, 518 ish if they can hold it. And then would look for like 600 on the way back up. That's like not quite 100 points, but could get 3 to 1, 4 to 1 risk to reward if they want to come back and hold this level. Otherwise, I don't really see much. We also haven't broken either side of the opening range. We're like halfway through B period, which would be the second set of 30 minutes that the market is open. And so if we don't break out during B period, it's usually just indicative of more chop. Let's see what all the big names are doing. All right. So things shifted a little bit since the opening bell. I'm surprised that the NASDAQ is not up more. Um, Meta is up almost 7%. Amazon and Microsoft are up almost 5%. Google is up 3%. Nvidia is up 1.5%. Like Intel is the only name. Intel and Apple are the two names for tech, and Apple isn't even down 1%. It's like, what is the holdup? I'm gonna guess that it's chip makers if I had to take a wild stab in the dark. But I mean, even AMD is only down 1%. Yeah, it's really odd. I mean, the S&P is up 1%. The Dow is up 1.33%. The Nasdaq is up almost 1%, but my God, it's not tradable. Honestly, like that makes me a little bit hesitant on the long side. If we have that many tech mega caps up and the Nasdaq can't be up 1%, there's got to be some tech internals that are not looking so hot this morning. I'm not going to go dig deep into what that is, but um, when you have those particular names, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, all up 4 and 5%, and the Nasdaq isn't up 1%, that is not healthy in my opinion. So not looking to like jump in and short this because that's a lot of big name stocks that are up, but that's rather strange. Um, just from like a sort of like how the market functions standpoint. There's a break of the high. Getting through this buy imbalance from the overnight here at 6:30. Semi looking to see if they reoffer this big imbalance from the overnight, but it's like it lines up exactly with the opening range high. I'm pushing off of it for now. Just kind of watching this trade here. Now they're holding above this imbalance level. I guess they get a push here in a second. Edge of value is like 665, overnight high, call it 700, and then previous day's high, another 25 points from then. So buyers have some pretty obvious targets to the upside. Um, So far the price action has really been kind of gross. Just range wise, it doesn't mean that the depth of market isn't trading fast, but like range wise, we're trading a lot slower than we did on Friday. So just notable that targets might need to be a little bit more nearby. Like that break of the opening range high was like 30 points and you got to 60. So yeah. So like only a 30-point opening range breakout on the NASDAQ at the moment. And look, 30 points is not nothing, but typically I'm stop loss is 15 to 20 points. So not even at 2-to-1 risk to reward and just kind of like stalling already. Let's just check on a higher time frame. Yeah, I mean, obvious targets are overnight high. I think this is previous day's high here, and then previous week's high is not far past that. But do they have the actual momentum for that is kind of a question mark at the moment. After last week's big tech earnings, something to maybe consider that I'm kind of sitting here chewing on is um, perhaps a bit of rotation back into some of the mega cap names. You know, there's been some high flying AI stocks. Um, the core weaves and the um, uh, can't name another one right now because I don't really trade things like that. Seagate um, and SanDisk are all names that have been pretty high flying. So I haven't checked those this morning, but if those are down and the mega caps are up, that would be something I'd think about as kind of what's anchoring or what's slowing the Nasdaq down here. I mean, so far this was kind of the best trade. Was a quick little pop into this imbalance here at 530. Depending on where your entry was, you're looking at like 100-ish points from where we are now. But I probably would have wanted to see that either a little bit lower slash would have wanted another test there before I thought about getting in. Um, so possible that we just kind of grind in this slow motion way up to the overnight high. But man, if I'm taking this opening range break on the NASDAQ and I'm only up like 25 to 30 points from it, I wouldn't be super thrilled with that. You guys watch me trade. I typically am like I haven't looked recently at what my average hold time is, but I think it's like under 10 minutes. It's probably under 5, to be honest with you. Um, I did have, of course, like we had the stream on Friday, and uh, I missed one trade and then took a stop at break even on another one, and then got off stream, got something to drink, came back, caught the short that I didn't catch on stream, and then waited a little bit longer and caught a really nice move before the rally into the close uh, on the Nasdaq, and caught like a 300 point M and Q trade uh, just by kind of trailing my stop like 50 to 60 points behind it. Might be one of my largest single trade winners ever trading M and Q. Um, but of course, that wasn't on stream, so it didn't happen. And I have screenshots of it, but I was like terrified to like send that out into the universe and be like, oh, what kind of karma am I putting out there to show my 300 point M and Q trade? So maybe I'll catch one of those on stream sometime. But it was also like, I don't know that that's the most exciting thing to watch either. Like the end result is exciting, but I was basically just like managing my stop above higher lows um, for like 2 hours, which is way, way longer than I like to be in a trade. But I basically just got a really good entry and was like almost immediately up 50 or 60 points. And so I just kind of like put my stop at break even and was like, it's Friday. Like, if it stops me out, like I'm done for the day. If it goes higher, I'm just like going to trail my stop behind whatever sort of obvious structural pieces there are. Um, and then once I was up like 300 points or almost 300 points, I just put an offer out um, and got tagged and was like, all right. So it feels like most of the time that I do stuff like that, I move my stop too soon, or they come back and get my stop by just a hair. So market gods looked fondly on me on Friday, just not fondly enough for me to do it on a live stream. Nasdaq closing in on up almost 1%. Just going to join the other two indexes. Guess market wants to go risk on until the next weekend, whenever geopolitical uncertainty rises on Friday at 5 p.m. when futures close. You don't really see me interested in taking a trade here. Um, like the overnight high and the previous day highs are very obvious targets slash also resistance points. And we're not that far away from them right now. So the risk to reward there just isn't there for me. And I just really hate this like slow grind up price action. Um, and as I've already mentioned, I don't really quite understand how we're grinding this much on the NASDAQ with the names that are up right now. That's something I'll probably dig into when I get off stream, but I don't want to be like calling top or, you know, calling for a pullback that isn't going to happen, but it makes me suspicious. Like I'm suspicious if uh those big names are up this much and the Nasdaq is like, okay, I'm just going to grind, 50 points above the opening range. I hate some of these like I don't know. You see like I was a part of like a trading group many, many years ago and like I have never been able to get successfully off of their email list. I finally got them out of my text messages. Like they literally were like, I had somebody call me in the middle of like a work day and was like, "Do you want to like, why haven't you been in the group?" And I'm like, "Dude, I haven't been a part of this group for like 3 years. I don't know how out of date your list is." But they're one of those like sort of, I don't know, sensationalist type groups that like I get stuff that like, if you don't watch our live stream, you are gonna just lose all your money this week. It's like, why don't you guys chill? So I don't like to be sensationalist, but I do take note of when lots of big names are up in the index that I'm trading and the index is not reacting. Like Amazon, Meta, and Google and Microsoft all up that much and the NASDAQ can't get up 1%. Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't know. You trade markets long enough and you can just kind of have that like something feels a little off feeling without being able to necessarily put words to it. And that's kind of what I'm getting here. And I could be very wrong. We could just grind up and take out the high and the previous day's high. I mean, that is what the buyers look like they want to try and do. But um, if you have a sort of like top holdings of the S&P right now, like she's pretty green. And since I'm not taking any trades, now I want to go look at what is in the NASDAQ that is down, keeping this from being a lot higher. So the way that I do this is like uh, go to Thinkorswim and go to watch lists and go to public. And I'm just going to go to the NASDAQ 100. All right. So leading the charge is, I'm wrong here. So leading the charge here is CoreWeave, which is an AI stock. Um, so what's on the other side of this? Seagate is down. So I was correct there. ARM is down. Okay. Broadcom, Apple. I mean, there's just not anything that's that super red. Like, how are we not higher? They're gonna try to push it higher now. They're listening to me talk, but I don't see any obvious reason as to why this is not up way, way higher. But it's like you can also kind of have this like, I don't know, call it your suspicious feeling slash whether it's bias talking or, just looking at market internals or whatever. And I think the trap for newer traders is like, oh, well, I must be like something is wrong, right? I mean, I don't know. There's so many stocks that could be pulling this around and geopolitical stuff and futures pressure and hedging and the list kind of just goes on and on. So like having that idea or having that sort of like background, like, something feels a little strange to me, um, perfectly fine. But also doesn't mean you need to execute on it, right? Like had I decided back here where I was mentioning like, why are we not up more than 1%? And tried to fade that, like I would already be stopped out. So I'm not getting in front of this sort of like slow motion uh, bid that's just kind of, you know, up and to the right. They're going to get the previous day's high here potentially. Um, but I can also choose to not touch it. Um, Now, I will say, given what I've been talking about and feeling like this momentum is a little bit slow for the names that are up, um, I'm going to start to look at. So we have this. This is like a very obvious sort of like spike high that I think they're close enough that they're going to try to take that out. Looking on a higher time frame, what I'm looking for is potential spots of resistance. This one here, which is like just past the previous day's high, but like you have this low here, you have some of these highs here, and you have last week's high at 760. So some obvious targets for the buyers, but probably not going to materialize fast enough. These type of like grind up moves also don't tend to end in grind up moves. They tend to be, you know, people are fading, people are shorting, whatever it might be here up. And then you just kind of can't, they can't get out. You know, it's just one directional move. You're getting like very, very small, if not any sort of pullbacks. And if you're shorting and you're adding to position and you're shorting and you're adding to position, typically that results in some type of kind of like, you know, blow off top, even like intraday thing where you'll get like maybe the range has been 15 to 20 points over a couple minutes and then it'll go to like 40 or 50. And that is more indicative of a potential top there as they take out the previous day's high. So I would need to see some kind of pressure valve release before I decided to step into this, and also totally open to the idea that I'm just completely wrong and this is just going to grind up and be a nice trend day up and to the right. But buyers need to like start doing some volume up here. It's just so thin. I mean, even when we hung out here, right? And they hung out, all this consolidation here was even less volume than they did consolidating right here. I mean, you have some overnight volume mixed in, but like they're not doing a lot of volume up here. So, you know, for me, if I'm like, I don't really trade opening range breakouts, but like I kind of can gauge general health of an opening range breakout for the most part. If it's like breakout and then just immediately start doing tons of volume, right? You can just kind of see like maybe you don't get like a full point of control right after you break, but like you build a really high volume node and like we didn't do any of that. Um, so I'm not going to put my tinfoil hat on and say that somebody knows something, but it's kind of a weird Monday so far. I see one of you is sending me pictures of flowers and to go swim in the pool. Just getting uh just getting angry at my short short bias. I don't know that I'm biased short. I just like I don't understand why we're not, you know, why is the Nasdaq with the names that are up lagging the other indexes so bad right now? Like I mean even the break through the previous day's high. Okay. Not even 10 points, you know, and kind of one of those like if you don't understand the price action or like what's going on, probably better off just shutting it down for the day and get a little bit of a pullback here. You know, stream on Mondays, they said, and fun, they said, but instead, just slow motion grind. And Amazon is just ripping from since earnings. Like they gapped up from they closed at like 235 and then gapped up and closed at 270 and now they've gapped up again and trading at 287. So that's just like just a massive, just a huge like it's just a huge move for a stock of that size to move like that. It means it's up like 30% in 2 days. I mean, the other thing about this move is they didn't really give you, unless you just feel like, sort of just buying and praying, uh, get like a little bit of a pullback here. Was that 76? Like a 20-point pullback ish, you know? Um, but yawn. So since this isn't doing anything else, I will remind anyone that's watching that we release a what we call a Delta Reads each Sunday that uh, looks at the previous week's Delta picture and kind of looks at different levels that could possibly trade going into the current week. Um, and that's free on our blog. You can find it at our website. And just free levels, free analysis to look at. If it's something that you're interested in, you can put your email in and can put your email in and get notifications for when it goes live. Or you can just manually check by going to the website. So um, just a little self promotion there, but it is something that's free, and we try to take the angle of we're not we're not selling levels, or we're not like this is the level that's going to hold till the end of time or anything like that. But it's just looking at order flow and aggression at sort of like a higher, more zoomed out picture than we do when we're analyzing stuff on the stream intraday. So if it's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to go check that out. I'll be here for like another like 15-ish minutes. I'm probably not going to take a trade unless something really exciting happens. But, opening range got set back here. We had the one pullback, um, held the area that I very much wanted it to hold, but it was basically just sort of like a spike and then gone. So didn't really even see it trade in the area that I wanted it to for any length of time. And since then, it's just been up and to the right. Very, very small pullbacks. And looking on this higher time frame, they're going to try to take out last week's high. Zoom in, and last week's high is like 763 and a quarter. Next sort of obvious spot for the buyers. But just like volume, or lack thereof. So I mean, I'd say that it's obviously like this is productive for the buyers in the sense that like, getting through the previous day's high, if they can get through the previous week's high, all good MGI levels to be taken out. But if they take them out on this kind of volume, that would be that's concerning to me. Like, I mean, if we're just looking at the volume discrepancy from, RTH slash the overnight session, like not even close to the amount of volume as we're breaking important levels here. So nobody with size is really like stepping in to sort of like, try to push this thing higher. But I will say it's probably going to have a really sharp up move here shortly if sellers can't step in, because you're just getting a pressure build of like shallow pullback or no pullback, break previous day's high, almost breaking the previous week's high. And if you're short, people that are trying to fade this, like you're not able to take profit slash maybe not even able to get out at break even depending on where your entry is. And so I think eventually you're going to see some type of sort of capitulation move to the upside here. Not something that I'm really interested in fading because is really hard to do, but I'm anticipating that that's gonna happen here momentarily. And that's probably the start of it right there. That's to the previous week's high. It's gonna be that pop. That might be your like temporary-ish sort of like blow off top here. You can see like a delta zone printing there. Buyers getting super, super aggressive. Probably some stops going off above that weekly high. So really nothing for me. You know, you can watch a whole live session of me sitting on my hands, but like, you know, they're just for how I like to trade, this would have been like the only entry that I might have looked at. Um, and we just, held it for 5 seconds. So not enough time for me to sort of gauge what participants were doing in this area. And since then, we've just been like up and to the right, like that's, you don't want to be fading this. And like I said, I don't quite understand the mechanics behind why the Nasdaq is still lagging, though it may be playing a bit of catch up to the S&P now. Um, let's see. Yeah, the Nasdaq is now up more than either of the other two indexes, so finally played catch up. You can see price speeding up there. I mean, they're trying to break out, you know. They're above the previous week's high. They're above some of these pivot highs from the end of the week before. Uh, and it's a little thinner. It's kind of a flattish profile, kind of have a double distribution from this week. So showing a little bit of exhaustion there at the top. But so far, we've had like incredibly shallow pullbacks. So I don't really have any interest in trying to fade this. We would need to sell off like 60 to 70 points and then get back up to the high for me to be interested in potentially fading it. Um, I think this is a little bit of a dangerous area for buyers. Um, but this isn't fadeable in my opinion. You're trying to break out from last week. Um, doing a little bit more volume here on the break of the previous week's high. I'm gonna poke my head up here and see if there are any large orders anywhere. Sometimes you can find large orders on the depth of market that, all right, so there's 87 is the first really large order I see, which is at 866, so like about 80 points away. I don't really see that much though. It's not like there's like 500 lots sitting up here. Sometimes when you have orders that big, they can provide like they end up being a bit of they end up being a bit of a magnet from a distance. But I don't see anything that's that big. Not enough to really flag anything. And if you can't tell, since I've barely even like, hovered over the DOM to place an order, these are not really my day type. Slow motion up and to the right, like looks easy to trade, but uh it requires me to assume that the pullbacks are going to be nice and gentle, and Friday's pullbacks were not gentle, so you know, and that's also how you end up with moves like this because people come in and they're expecting some level of volatility and they're expecting certain kinds of pullbacks and certain types of trade action and they get in position based on that idea without watching it trade first, and then we do this slow grind up into the right and people get off sides. And these are like, I will say, as someone who used to have a really bad habit of fading things like this way too early, um, these are like, to me, like easier to get yourself in trouble when you're fading because they're slow motion, right? Like you're like, oh well, I'm only 15 points down, it'll probably come back. I'm only 30 points down, it'll probably come back. And then, at some point it does decide to accelerate, and then you find yourself pretty far underwater and you just can't get back out. Um, so I think that's kind of a known like behavior error that people make, and you can see it play out in the market, right? Like slow motion, and then eventually you get an acceleration. So like not even giving, even if I wanted to get on board, just like no looks at it. It's probably just because I had to put a title for this stream and I named it something like post earnings volatility. It's just gonna trade like a snail. I have to go back and rename the stream just so if somebody goes and watches it later, they're like, volatility? What volatility? Yeah. Somebody mentioned in the Discord that it like moves like this will be like, you know, they look like I just talked for like 25 minutes, 30 minutes about like this seems like really slow motion. Like, where's the volatility? And it kind of makes you want to fade it. And it's just like you can't like there's just a passive bid under this right now, and you're totally right that like it will move against you should at this point, like I wouldn't want to be getting long because I assume there's going to be some type of semi-violent pullback since we've been so one directional. Don't know where that's coming or when that's going to happen. And then I don't really want to get short because it's just grinding up slow motion in the opposite direction. And like something that has helped me for like preventing myself from fading moves like this is I look at the like whatever pullbacks we've had, which would be like quote best case scenario for taking profit on a short, right? So like let's say that I got a decent entry at 730 on this pop, right? 25 points if I happen to get the exact low of this, you know, and same kind of thing here. You get about 25 to 30 points. And granted, my stop could probably be tighter based on today's volatility, but I'm still kind of like, you know, I keep my stops around what the volatility has been, not exactly, so hard when it pivots from one level of volatility on Friday to like whatever we're doing here on the Monday. But that helps me not fade things like this because it shows me that like one, I need a perfect entry, and two, I need a perfect exit. And even if that happens, I'm not going to make very many points. So from both sides, I just kind of like as soon as I get off stream, I'm probably going to turn this off and go do something else with my day. I will share some screenshots of our what we're working on for the DOM replay that will eventually become um, kind of a YouTube longer form YouTube video from us. We do some short form stuff because it's kind of like required in today's social media environment to just kind of keep putting content out. But these will actually be longer form instructional videos, and um, we'll look at a given sessions day. So it might even be like looking at something like today, like what was going on down in this area when we tried to sell back through it. Um, or looking at some points where we get reversals and like what kind of behavior was happening on the depth of market at that time, and walk through, at least for myself, how I like to execute and some different strategies for executing based on what you're actually seeing on the depth of market itself. So we'll share some of that in the Discord today. If you're not already a member, it's free to join. We do have a members only section. So if you're signed up as a member of Scalper IQ, you'll have access to that. But we do have a public Discord as well. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. Buyers are building volume up here above the previous week's high. They finally building some volume after just kind of slow push. I'm not going to make any predictions because this price action is very, very, very different from what we've seen last week. I got to give buyers the edge. They're above the previous day's high. They're above the previous week's high. And we haven't seen a single sort of like aggressive sell candle from Scalper IQ since they pushed off of the Globex open. So trade careful. If it's not your environment, sit on your hands, turn off the screens, go do something else. We'll be back on Wednesday. So come join us there. Come join our Discord, say hi, see what we're all about. Cheers, everyone.